So I'll start with Melanie. You're with the coalition, so please explain the very specific plans when it comes to reaching black men for the election.
Lon is, hi, Roland, how are you?
Great.
Lon Walls is going to open us up.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Melanie. I'm Lon Walls, lead communications consultant for the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and founder of Walls Communications. On behalf of the National Coalition and Black Youth Vote, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's virtual town hall with the theme, Brothers, Can We Talk? But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to DJ Hollywood Reds for getting us started with his music. Got us into the mood, and we kind of go from there. During the past few weeks, he's been busy on Black Lives Matter Plaza here in D.C., providing inspiration to protesters and those who want to make a change. And with that brings us to tonight's town hall, an examination and discussion of the Black Lives Matter movement and how it impacts the lives of Black men specifically. Black men, the phrase, I can't breathe, does more than just apply to a treatment by the police. It resonates throughout our daily lives with the jobs we can't get, the promotions that never come, the healthcare system that's failed us, and simply trying to survive financially, emotionally, and spiritually. Tonight's town hall alone won't solve all those problems, but of course we can put those issues on the table so they can be discussed. And trying to address these problems through civic engagement is what the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation has been doing for almost 40 years. The person who's been leading that charge has been Melanie Campbell, the organization's president and CEO.
Hold on 1 second, folks. If you actually, can you mute? Because I'm getting the sound for a number of them, and your sound is not coming through clear. So, folks, if you can actually mute your microphones, Lon, go ahead and finish, please.
Okay, and trying to address these problems through civic engagement is exactly what the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation does and has been doing for 40 years. The person who's been leading that charge is Melanie Campbell, the organization's CEO and president. She's truly been a tireless and fearless leader for all of us. Allow me to introduce Melanie Campbell and to offer her thoughts about tonight's theme and introduce our moderator. Melanie, the screen is yours.
Hello, hi. Thanks, Lon. Thanks, Roland, for partnering with Roland Martin and all of you all, our brothers. I would spend the time if I started talking individually. Thank everyone on this discussion. It's something that we know at the National Coalition. We do a lot of work around focus on Black women and girls. We do a big focus around voting. And things like that. But we thought it was really, really important that we, as an organization, focus in on lifting up our brothers, our brothers, and those who are watching in this moment. It is I believe, a transformational moment. And each of you are already doing the good works from your various perches. And so this is the start of a conversation. Obviously, with so many of you all on the call, it won't be a long conversation, but it will be a start of something that we want to, at the organization, to take, listen, and then build on this for future, not just conversations, but future ways that we can work together collectively to bring about the transformational change. We know that we are in a moment with the Black Lives Matter movement, that in many ways is very, very, very organic, led by our young people. And there's not a movement that has ever been successful without that. And so I'm going to turn it over and thank everybody for being on here and another panel that will be on later, and know that the National Coalition wants to be a part of the solution with you. And thank you for your leadership. And let's get this conversation started, Roland. Thank you again.
All right. First and foremost, folks, we had a conversation last week with members of Alpha Phi Alpha, then also Philip Agnew and his initiative as well. And the reality is so much energy is around Black women, Black women, Black women. So I'm very curious to know, Sean, what are you hearing out there when you are talking with Black men? Do they feel as if they're being paid attention to, that the issues they care about are being addressed?
So thanks, Roland, for that question. And I just got to lift up Melanie for just bringing this together because as Black men, where would we be without Black women? And in my network, I am hearing that, Black men are united. I lead the national campaign for Black male achievement, and for the last dozen years, there has been a growing movement around focusing on the issues of Black men and boys. And I just think that we are at a place now when we think of the Black Lives Matter movement where we have to decide, is this going to be different? Because quite frankly, there has been a part of me initially when I was like, here we go again. I could just send some of the same messages and tweets from 5 years ago with Freddie Gray and the uprising in Baltimore. But what I am feeling and what I am healing is an important slip of the tongue, because the whole issue of wellness and therapy with Black men, I think, has been elevated in this moment. First in the pandemic, and us saying it's okay as Black men to say that we need help, that we need to ask for help. But I really think that this is a transcendent moment. And I am hearing that from my network. I believe, Roland, that what Emmett Till meant for the ignition of the civil rights movement and his murder in 1955, the murder of George Floyd, coupled with so many other murders around this time, but specifically George Floyd, is the ignition of, I think, a modern day Black Lives Matter movement. And we're about to see a decade of change and disruption, unrest, like we saw in the 60s. And so there is excitement, and still there is some skepticism. Like, where do we as Black men wind up after all the fanfare and all of the attention around this issue fades away?
Tony Lewis Jr., when we look at the issues that Black men say they're not being addressed, from your perspective, what are those? What should be talked about? I get police reform, that's one thing, but what else?
Yeah, I think we definitely have to look past police reform. I think we won't have social justice until we have economic justice. And so much of that, unfortunately, we talk a lot about how disproportionately Black men have been impacted by the criminal justice system, and how that has created great challenges for us to really ascend and be able to be economically safe. And our communities continue to deal with public safety. And I think so with that, I think Black men want to be acknowledged. Black men want access. They want opportunity. Black men want to be able to speak for themselves. They want to be able to be included, particularly Black men from the most impoverished communities, Black men that have had challenges in their lives. My work in reentry has taught me that so many of them want to be able to come back and truly, take care of their families and protect their communities. But they can't do that when they can't get a job, or they can't live where they want to live. So all of those things are super important. So I think as this energy around the Black Lives Matter movement really has to be hyper-focused in how do we create economic justice when all these philanthropic organizations are looking to give to causes, that we have to ensure that funding, that money reaches the people that need it the most. And we have to empower those that are really more likely to have police involvement, even on the police reform front. It needs to be people that grew up in communities where you had daily, multiple interactions with policemen daily, to really help the police get to the point where they need to be to serve and protect our communities. That can't come from people that's just simply talking about being pulled over by the police. And that's not a shot at those folks. I'm just simply saying that I feel like a lot of Black men feel like our voices, particularly Black men from impoverished communities, Black men that have been formerly incarcerated, Black men who may not have went to college, they feel like their voices aren't necessarily at those tables. So I hope that moving forward, we can be more inclusive about the Black experience and get sort of those issues to the front so that they can be addressed. Because I feel like those are the people that really can speak with the most expertise when it comes to police reform and really what Black people need in this country.
My son, from your perspective, what messaging should be taking place when it comes to getting Black men, not just to register and to vote? What should be said, and not just from politicians, but also from grassroots groups, civil rights groups, others?
Well, I think in order to get Black men involved in voting, you have to talk about things that actually directly impact, You know, you have to, like Tony Lewis said, you can't keep having conversations about us without us. And those who are directly impacted really are the ones who are going to be the solution. A lot of our black males are, you know, when we look at education is failing black males. You know, I'm being an educator, I actually teach at forums with educators, with principals, with teachers, and they don't even identify how to keep the young black man in school. You know, they have not come up with curriculums. They not come up with teaching styles that really adhere to what the black man needs. So we have to really be intentional these days. We're having conversations and we say, oh, just vote, but you're not talking about things that they really want. Black man wants to be able to provide for his family. He wants to feel, you know, black man, we don't want masculinity to be targeted all the time. I'm part of organizations where my sisters are my leaders. You know, the Until Freedom is, I'm one of the co-founders, where Tamika Mallory is the leader, Linda Sarsour is our leader, and I have no problem following my sisters because they are built to lead. They are the mothers of this civilization. But there has to be space to where it doesn't make us feel as if we can't speak, if we speak too loud, that we're saying something wrong. You know, there's too much aggression. There has to be, we have to fit what the black man encompasses. You know, so when we talk about laws and voting, we have to talk about things that specifically are directed to black males. You know, we're into certain things that I don't think this culture or what they're talking about as far as voting is even focusing on. We're so far, like, our kids need to be educated a certain way. We need to be educated according to what it is that we love. You know, I tell teachers all the time, black males, as a young black male, I wasn't interested in sitting in the room while you just put something on the board. We were interactive learners. We learned off being interactive. So we have to start building curriculums. We have to start figuring out, how do we build schools, and how do we build around curriculums that empower black men, that make black men want to be involved? How do we have jobs that not just only make a black man make a little bit of money, but he's an entrepreneur. He's able to sustain and be somebody who's actual contributing member of his family. You know, right now, I love our sisters. Our sisters are graduating at higher rates than us. And it's beautiful because they are the mothers of civilization. But at the end of the day, we have to focus on why these things aren't happening for black men, and then focus on what do we do to make sure that they do happen for black men.
This is, and again, when we talk about issues, we talk about what should they be. Dwayne, again, what are they? If you're out there speaking to a brother, whether he's young, middle-aged, or old, what are the issues?
Well, I think, one, we as black men have no time for what I call separating the sheep. I'm 55 years old. I want the best for my 10-year-old, my 18-year-old, my 30-year-old, 40-year-old. My time is wrapping up. And I think we've got to figure out, I told my son this, and maybe one day my grandson, that we've got to figure out not what's left in my life, but how do we give them every possible chance? And I think it starts with one listening. I don't at 55 even think I know what an 18-year-old is thinking, but I can definitely listen and be honest. And I think part of this thing about being honest, it isn't about you telling a young person what your life was. It's about being honest about what went well, what didn't go well, and what you want to tell that young brother to give him the best shot. So many times we get in these conversations about elevating ourselves. It doesn't matter what D did. Don't matter at this point. What matters is listening and doing everything possible to get my resources, my circle of influence given to that young man, those young men. You know, to me, I know it's easy for us to say, oh, that's gone bad. I'm proud of our brothers. I'm from North Philly. I'm seeing brothers that take a lot more responsibility at an earlier age than I did. But I think also I got to stand to the side and say, what? Brother, listen, I'll listen to you, and you can have my platform. But this is a time about elevating and educating and empowering, but also being honest of what it means to be a man, what's expected of them, but also what our shortcomings were.
To Reverend Tony Lee, your perspective.
Well, so, and I think that also, though, that we do have to deal with that there are some institutional pieces, whether it's institutional racism, systemic racism, from a faith perspective, or you call it wickedness in high places, that we also have to deal with. And so we're dealing with issues of poverty, health disparities, food insecurity, a lot of that kind of stuff. And there's a need to be able to navigate how these institutional issues impact the daily lives of our brothers, how the system is rigged in such a way, whether it's the school to prison pipeline, whether it is issues around policing, etc., how that impacts daily lives. And if we don't hit that, then folks won't see how it's relevant to them. And then they won't understand fully the need to deal with the policy stuff, the institutional stuff, and the voting stuff. But we have to be able to make the connection between a lot of these systemic things and understand that you don't change, that you don't beat down systemic racism without a systemic response. Protest is a piece of that systemic response. And so systemized protest, but also with protest are some other things that we have to do to be able to grab a hold of and deal with systems and institutions that have been, that at the end of the day, it's white supremacy, it's white supremacist thought, and it is systemic, endemic racism that we have to deal with that is seeped into the systems of this nation.
Jared?
Yes, I actually echo the sentiments of everyone who's spoken already, and I believe that Black men comprehensively just want security. Young Black men, especially moving from adolescence into young adulthood, want social security. And when I say social security, I'm not talking about the government system or the benefits or anything into that nature, but the actual state of being secure and feeling secure.
If you just Jared, 1 second, Jared. Hold on, Jared. If you got your microphone open, people just mute it. That way, I'm not getting the feedback for someone. Jared, keep your microphone open. The rest of the panelists, please close your microphones. Jared, go right ahead.
Oh yes. So when we talk about the state of being secure, we're talking about freedom. The freedom that Black men want to feel, freedom from danger, safety, freedom from fear or anxiety, freedom from the prospect of being laid off from their job. So we're talking about job security. Black men want an equitable chance at life and at living. And so I echo the sentiments of everyone who's spoken, but I believe that comprehensively, and I can only speak on the behalf of the young Black male community, that young Black men, especially moving from adolescence into young adulthood, want social security, the state of being free.
Diallo, your perspective on the first question.
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to something that Tony Lewis mentioned too, is I really think that Black men also want to be seen and have a space to be seen and heard, that their voices are able to be elevated in the conversations about what's happening to them in their communities. And I think what we have to do is we have to work collectively and understand that we have to really begin a process of bringing our community together, because oftentimes we have these conversations, they're very isolating. And so it was mentioned about how successful Black women are, but a lot of times in a lot of the conversations I see, it's pitting Black men against Black women instead of really what we need to do to heal the Black community in a way that we all can rise together. We can all work collectively to liberate ourselves from these systems of oppression. And what we need to do is we also need to make sure that as we're having these conversations, those that are most marginalized among us need to have spaces where their voices are heard, the struggles that they have are heard, that they can be seen. Because oftentimes as Black men, a lot of us walk through spaces and we're seen in a way that's demonized. And it starts from birth through adolescence, and that's part of the history of this country. When we get into policing and Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff, these systems have been in place to demonize Black men and the Black community as a whole in ways that have marginalized us and make us less than human in public spaces. And so as we start to elevate, listen to the voices of those that have been most impacted, and develop strategies with folks, not for folks, in ways that we can create meaningful change and really elevate, educate, but also listen. A lot of times we get in these spaces and we do a lot of talking, but we don't do a lot of listening to our brothers that are struggling every single day, trying to make it in this world. And so we have to break down these barriers that exist. We have to have Black men also understand that we're part of a larger community. We have to have the larger community see us as part of that community as well, as an integral part of Blackness in this country and in the world. And so as we start to elevate our thinking, develop strategies, and not necessarily look to others to do for us, but also really look at what we can do strategically, working together, having the conversations, elevating best practices. There's things that we know. I think all of the panelists have listed out things that we know, but how do we execute that? And I think Black men will engage when they see a real game plan, that it's not just a rhetoric that's happening out there, that we have a game plan of really systematically changing and elevating, and they can see themselves, we can see ourselves in the success and the change and the future as we move forward.
But I think one of the things that we also have to come to grips with is that every brother is not struggling. Every brother is not in the same situation. I think part of the problem when we have these conversations is that everyone is not going to be at the same place. And so the reality is you have to have different ways to connect with different Black men at different stages. Your conversation with a brother who's in college is different from a brother who's who graduated from high school. It's different from a brother who owns his business. It's different from one who's actually working or who's not working. And so you got to look at it that way. Who wants to speak on that? How you can't just approach this, because if the dialogue is solely about police reform, there may be somebody who says that ain't my main thing.
I think for me, Roland, I think that's exactly the problem. And I think we say that we're not that Black men and Black people are not a monolith. And that's a very true statement. But there has to be, like you said, there has to be a connection point. As I'm walking, they're marching down the block. I'm in Kentucky right now. So they're having a march right by the car. So you might hear that.
We got you. But it's all good.
But that is an issue. And we have to find one point that we all connect on, and we understand that whether you're Black and you have more, and prison reform is not yours, equity is something that we all need. I don't care if you're one of the richest Black men in America, you realize that there's a ceiling that your white counterpart reaches that you're not able to reach because you're a Black man. Even if you're a basketball player, and you're the best basketball player, you realize, like LeBron realized, they still gonna write nigga on your fence. These are things that don't matter what your circumstances, what your financial circumstances are, these things are going to always happen. So I think we have to connect on the fact that whatever level you are as a Black man, there is something that is holding you back. There is white supremacy holding you back at some level, no matter what it is that you're doing. And we have to connect, because we have to understand, especially those who are at the highest, you have to understand that the higher you are, you can't get higher than the lowest person that's attached to you. And that's the reality. So we have to figure out, we have to acknowledge that prison reform means that Blacks who are being incarcerated at a higher level, it could be you tomorrow. It could be your cousin tomorrow. It could be your son tomorrow, because it's Blacks. It doesn't say rich Blacks. It doesn't say poor Blacks. It's saying that Black people are being incarcerated. Hey, yo. What's going on, brother? Okay. No. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We get out my car. Close the door, bro. I try to jump into the car, and it happened to be a Caucasian that tried to get into my car because I'm in the back seat. And so I had this conversation. He was actually trying to drive off. Lord have mercy. But
driving, Mr. My son?
Yes. The man tried to drive with my car. Y'all almost seen a whole nother my son. I'm glad that even happened like that.
We got you.
But anyway, what I was saying is, we just have to, as Black men, we have to understand that we can only go as high as the lowest level that we are. And we have to intersect on that point. It's not about what you have or what you don't have. We just have to acknowledge that the color of your skin and the fact that you're a Black male can put you at liberty and put you in jeopardy at any given time. And when we realize that, until we don't have to, let's not wait until it actually happens, because it always happens. You know, we watch our biggest stars and our richer people at some point get to that point where they realize that white supremacy is real. You know, so what we have to do is acknowledge that and take that and move forward.
Sean, I'm sorry. Who go right ahead? Who wants to take that? Because the reason I posed that question, the reason I posed it, the Trump administration is very specific. They've said they are targeting black men. They know they're not going to get black women's vote, and they are specifically targeting black men with the First Step Act and his economic policies. There's a reason why they're doing that. Go. Who's jumping in? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo what you just said earlier. This issue of equity is real. Whether you got money, don't have money, at the end of the day here, it's the least of us. As I said earlier, at a certain point in your life, it comes full circle. And you realize that your sons and your cousins and your brother, et cetera, is a big circle. We've got to dig it and say, who's the least of us? And this issue of equity is real. You can ask anyone that's talking right now as part of this panel has had a serious inequity that occurred in their life.
What you doing, man?
Them to have to take a serious.
Guys, be sure to mute the other microphones, please, and then go right ahead.
You better be tripping, man.
I just want to echo that and say, I think this equity part we should maybe delve into. But we all got an example of a significant inequity that affected the trajectory of our life and that of our loved ones.
And Roland, I think it's really important also when we talk about, we got to be careful when we say the least of us, right? Because I think that there's this narrative that that black men, no matter where you are, you don't have assets, right? And I think that, or you're not an asset to your community. And I think that narrative has to shift. I think that we have to find ways to make intergenerational connections. And whether you are formally incarcerated or you are in the boardroom in a corporation, there is something and you are God-given to do for our people, right? And I think as a whole, and the young brother was talking earlier, I think what we need at this very essence as black men is love, safety, and a sense of belonging. And we have never had that in this country, but we have to bring that up for each other, and that everyone has a role, and it has to be some kind of interconnected, intergenerational, and it can't just be one sector. Philanthropy is not going to be the cavalry that comes to save the day. We have to understand that we are the cavalry in our own communities, right? We are the curators of the change. And we have so much in our communities that is rich. We can fund ourselves when we look at the faith community and the resources and how we give. Black people give more than anybody else in this nation. We serve more than anybody else, but we have this opportunity in this transcendent moment of Black Lives Matter to not just focus on policing. That is an important issue, but here's an opportunity to put everything on the table with environmental justice, criminal justice reform, economic access. And so I think the connections and finding a way. Some folks, your role may just be to write a check. You know, not everybody's going to be on the front line marching, but we need to be able to get a common narrative for success and for liberation, but also offer different on-ramps. So no matter where you come from, where your address or your zip code is, that we're all fighting for the same thing.
But that's why I think you have to take this, when you hear the phrase, do Black Lives Matter? Okay, remember, people are going to answer that question in a different way, depending upon the station of their life. So a father is going to answer it differently, possibly, than a single guy. It's going to answer it differently from a guy who actually owes child support over somebody who doesn't. It's going to be different for the person who is in corporate America, but who's at a high level versus the person who's at a VP level or director level or even lower or all the way at the bottom. It's going to be different from that person in his different areas. And I think I think part of the issue is that for many of us, we make references to the Black freedom movement without realizing that it didn't matter what your station was. Jim Crow was Jim Crow. Didn't matter. You couldn't live over there. Y'all had to live here. And I think as somebody who deals with words every day, I think the struggle for a lot of people is understanding I have to meet you where you are and I got to ask you, what are your issues? And then help connect the dots in terms of how politics and public policy plays a role in that. So when I run up on brothers who say, man, politics I ain't involved in that and it has no bearing on my life. And I go, really? Let me explain to you how. And then once I connect the dots, they're like, damn, I had no idea. That to me is how I think we have to be approaching this whole deal when we're communicating with brothers who are just like everybody else. Black men are like a lot of black women, are like white folks, Hispanic, like they just trying to live their life every day and not really fully understanding how public policy plays a role in a whole bunch of things happening in their lives. Anybody can jump in.
I think one of the things is really looking at this, and I think that's an important point, is it goes back to this collective work and responsibility within our communities that we all have to have a collective strategy of engaging folks where they are to be able to articulate what change looks like. We also have to make sure that folks understand what winning looks like. Too often in our community, Black men, even as we become more successful in life, it's still difficult to see what winning looks like because there's always this struggle for the next thing. And so even as you're talking to young folks, I got a 19-year-old son, a 13-year-old son, and a 17-year-old daughter. And it's helping them to understand what winning looks like when they hit that wall of apathy around everything that's going on in the world around them, about what they see in the streets, the failures of government, the failures of, and helping people to understand that you have to put in work in order to create change. I mean, this is not a passive thing. I mean, even if you're in the boardroom, you know that a Black CEO is making less than the white CEO doing the same job, right? So the racism impacts folks on all different types of levels on the socioeconomic spectrum. We have to help folks understand what winning looks like and understand that it is about our collective liberation and freedom. That the only way that we get at collective liberation and freedom is if we work together across spectrums, that we don't all have to be exactly the same. We don't have to flow the same way, but there's the same boot that's on our neck no matter where we are on the spectrum.
Anybody want to respond to that?
Well, Roland, and I think that what Diallo said was right on point, and that's not just a piece about what happens for Black men. That's just Black men, Black women. That's all of us. To be Black in America means that there are certain limitations imposed by the system upon us, that there are certain structural inequities that are in place, and all of us, brothers and sisters, can link arm in arm, young and old, up and down the line. It does not matter who you are, that there are systems and structures that are in place to be able to take care of you and your children and your children's children. And then it goes on to a piece of legacy, because I don't care who you are, that the system is shaped in such a way to keep you from being able to pass on any kind of generational wealth. And so then what does it mean to have a sense of legacy, to be able to pass on something for your children or your children's children? And I think those commonalities are ways that we can connect with people. I agree with you that we're all in different stations in life, but I believe that we're all in the same fire. We just may be in different locations within the fire, but the fire still burns, and we're all still dealing with 3rd and 4th degree burns.
Anyone else want to respond to the last question? So let me pick up. I want to pick up on that because again, and break it down even further. So you talked about income inequality. You talked about the creation of wealth and being able to pass stuff down. And the reason I'm keep returning to this when it comes to the messaging, and that is this here. If I'm talking to a brother who's a homeowner, I'm going to have to talk to him in a different way than a brother who's a renter, than a brother who lives with his parents. I'm gonna have to talk to somebody in a different way. And I think part of this, a lot of times, is real easy. I think it's easy on us when we talk about the collective, because we sort of want to be able to say, okay, everybody I'm talking to, we're all dealing with the exact same thing here. But it's degrees. I've actually heard black men say, hey, on a daily basis, I don't have that same encounter with police. So that's really not my number one or number two issue. This is. And so I think when we're sitting here dealing with this here, I think the first thing we got to do is, it's sort of like what Ella Baker said to SNCC students when they went south. Ella Baker said, look, don't think these sharecroppers who don't have a second or third grade education aren't smart. She said, take off your college clothes, and she said, put on your overalls and ask them, what is it you want to see change? And I'm here to help you with that, not tell you what it is to see change. And I think somebody made a point earlier how oftentimes we're talking in panels, but we're not listening. To me, that's where it starts. When I encounter somebody, I had a brother at Dulles Airport. Brother said, man, I saw your video and you said folks were stuck on stupid who didn't vote. He said, well, I didn't vote in the last election. Was I stuck on stupid? I went, yep. And he saw his eyes got big and he got deflated. I said, and I'll tell you why. I said, what are the three most important things that matter to you? And then he told me. And I stood there and I said, the president of the United States impacts those three things this way. And then I broke it down. I said, governor impacts it this way. Mayor impacts it this way. And he stood there, he said, I will not make that mistake again. I'm absolutely voting this year. He said, thank you for explaining it to me. And I think that's what doesn't happen enough. We don't ask, what do you care about? But then we then don't connect the dots and wait for them to go, now I see it.
Well, I think for me, Roland, that's a very serious problem that we have as Black people. I think, if you don't notice that if you are a homeowner and 95 or 98% of the people that live around you don't look nothing like you, and that doesn't bother you, then there's really nothing I can tell you. If you have a lot of money and you don't realize that most of the people in your circumference don't look like you or come from communities that look like you or that have the same culture that you have, and that doesn't bother you, then I might not be able to engage you. If those things don't bother, if you don't look and say, I have these things, but 90% of the people that I know that come from my community that look like me don't have those things, and that's not something that you want to change, then that's an issue that we really have to focus on. If I have to tell you one thing that directly impacts you, that might not impact that well, okay, I'm a homeowner, but the insurance that I have doesn't really work for me, or I have businesses, but the premium is higher for me. If those things if I have to individually impact you and you don't look at it and say, you know what, the majority of people who come from where I come from, my culture, my background, my understanding, where my grandmother came from, the history of where we come from, if that doesn't move you to say, I want all of the people that come from where I come from to have at least the chance to be a homeowner as me, then for me, it's really hard for me to engage those type of people. I have to leave them so they have to figure things out, because my passion and my understanding is for my people and my culture. And that's what I fight for, because I understand that every other culture, every other nationality, that's what they do. And that's why they're winning. If we continue to have this ideology about, all right, tell me how does this impact me individually? Because I don't know another culture that says that. They say if throughout my life, anywhere that you go, I live in Fort Lee, New Jersey, which is populated most by Asians. And they make sure that the Asians are taken care of. It ain't too many, there's no stores where Black people own stores in those communities. They make sure that they're taken. When I was incarcerated, every nationality, when you came to a new house, even if you was a Puerto Rican, if you was a white person, if you was an Asian, when you walked into the house, they said, do you have anything that you need? They brought you a care package. They made sure you were safe. Black people weren't doing that because there was this individual mind state. So until we get out of that mind state and realize that just because I'm okay, everything is not okay, I don't know how we're going to win.
And the other side of that, though, is that we have to look at the systemic side. And yes, there may be some Black folks that are not doing that, but we also have to look at redlining. We have to look at access to capital for Black businesses and entrepreneurs. We have to look at access to health care. And so I do believe that we also, and I think it was Rev Tony that brought up that we have to have a systemic approach. I would venture to say that the commonality as a Black man, no matter what your economic status or sexual orientation is, that we want to leave a legacy, right? And I think that that is where we can come together. Work that we have done with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement has been around the Black Male Equity Initiative, and we've talked about legacy wealth, and we have brought together in a room Black men, some of whom were formerly incarcerated, trying to get out of a debt, and others that were doing estate planning. But the central focus was our common faith, our shared faith, and it was done around the history. And I think that once we got to create these safe spaces, but I think that we have more in common infinitely than there are differences, no matter what your zip code or where you live. And that I think that we got to create those spaces around, we all want a sense of legacy. And someone brought up the notion of, generational wealth. Who doesn't want that? And how do we organize around that kind of legacy is, I think, a strategy that we can, it speaks to all Black men.
Who wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so to piggyback, I think it's important for us to look at it's a macro piece of this and it's a micro piece, right? So on the macro level, obviously we want to be able to live, we want to be able to thrive. I think Black Lives Matter can't just be about police not killing Black people or Black people just living. We want Black people in this country to live and thrive, and that's going to take white people sharing power. And some people may see that as un-American, but I feel like that's the reality. That's what we got to push for. And what that will do, in my opinion, is create the access to opportunity, create access to lending, create access to, economic justice, economic strength, which in turn, I think will allow a lot of Black men. I mean, we face with so much, particularly those that's growing up in impoverished communities. For us to even think that far ahead is not really realistic to a lot of young men, because they're trying to survive, right? And so when you're in survival mode, you're not thinking about these things. That's why I think we got to find more ways for cross-fertilization among Black men. Like, I would love if just Black men would start moving back into certain communities so that young Black men that don't have, whatever the situation may be, they have access to you. And this can happen at the church, this can happen at the masjid, or whatever the case may be. But we got to find more intentional and strategic ways for that cross-fertilization, because if I've never seen it, I can't believe in it. And when you start talking to me about generational wealth, when you start talking to me about estate planning and life insurance and all of these things that's not conditional or not happening in my environment, I'm not going to be receptive to it. And so the only way we do that is for those Black men that are aware and have that knowledge and have even voting. I mean, I found myself standing in the gap so much in my city for all of these things that we're talking about, trying to be a translator, if you will, trying to be a living example. But when it don't touch people, when it's not in their experience. So what do we have to do about that? We got to find more ways to come together. Black men that have ascended in whatever industry and whatever lane, a lot of times they are disconnected from those individuals, whether they come from those communities or not. It's not a consistent interaction with those communities. So there are different dynamics, to your point, Mr. Martin, in terms of, what the needs are. But I think sort of a baseline need that we all have to speak to is that we want Black people, humanity, to be seen. We want to be treated fairly. We want equity. These are the things that we can be non-negotiable, because until then, it's going to be very difficult to address all those more micro issues. We're not a monolith. Everybody does not come from the hood. Everybody does not have a father doing life in prison. Everybody ain't grow up with people all around them dying all the time. Like, that's not, I had to learn that in my involvement, right? You know, as I've evolved, I've learned that, like, oh, okay, this ain't the experience of every Black man, but at the same time, we have to find places to have these conversations. We have to have spaces where people can get new people in their network. And none of us can just speak from our own experience, right? But what we have to press on as we talk about this American experiment, right? And even to Mice's point, every other culture does that because they weren't enslaved. Slavery and then what followed in this country dismantled us in that way. So I think this is an opportune, this is a time, opportunity for all of us to really reimagine what it's going to look like moving forward, and to start to strategize to how do we really make those theories become, manifest and become fruitful. I think this is the time. Like, we really got to go for the gusto, if you will, and don't leave anything off the table. We really have to say that this is a watershed moment for Black people, and we want things to change incrementally, maybe in some instances or some cases, but we want to see movement. The needle has to move right here, right now, and we cannot be divided. But the only way we going to, again, be united is that we have to have continuous conversations, and Black men have to be at those tables.
Yeah, Roland.
This is Dwayne Crawford again.
No, go ahead, Dwayne.
I want to say that I'm betting on my brothers, period. I'm betting on my brothers. And all I want to say about this part here, this is a watershed moment, but Ferguson was a watershed moment. Right? Rodney King was a watershed moment. This time, we've got to come together. I'm going to say this again. I humble myself and just listen. I've got to try to do my best in the balance of my life, give as much as I can to make sure my younger brothers are given every opportunity and how they define success. But I agree, it's communication. We got to keep going. We got to take advantage. I think what Black Lives Movement has done is, at least to me, you got a long way still to go in the sense of you got to get back out there and do everything possible. The same thing the saying goes in the scripture. Much is given, much is required. I've got to meet that requirement. Our brothers got to meet that requirement. We've got to do everything possible and leave a roadmap. When people see your legacy, I'm going to think about my family's going to do fine. My real legacy's got to be how many brothers did I lay down as much as I could the information and give them the best opportunity for success.
I think Jared was trying to jump in. Was that Tony Lee Jr. or Jared?
Male empowerment. I think that Roland, you made a really good point that we definitely have to take a look at the messaging, because there's not been a singular messaging that's been able to resonate with every kind of Black man in this country. When I was at Morehouse, I read an article by Tommy Shelby where she posed the question, is the foundation of Black solidarity collective identity, or is it common oppression? And I think that we have to figure out how to translate in our private language, because I believe there's private language that we have to communicate to Black men, and then public language that we have to communicate to Black men. And I think we have to figure out how to translate in private language creatively the sentiments of what, like Frederick Douglass said once, where he said that we're one with you under the ban of prejudice and proscription, one with you under the slander of inferiority, one with you in social and political disenfranchisement, that what you suffer, we suffer, what you endure, we endure. And so in an effort to really liberate Black men in America, especially young Black men, we as Black male leaders must really call on Black men to become a more unified collective agent for social change for the sake of us all. Because like what Martin Luther King Jr. said, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I can never be what I ought be until you are what you ought be. And that this is the interrelated structure of reality. And I think that we have to figure out the best way to communicate that to Black men in this country, especially this next generation of young Black men that's rising up, people around my age. What's the best way to communicate that so that we can truly be that collective agent for social change?
Hey, Roland, I just want to say one thing real quick. I think Tony Lewis just hit something on the head, though. I think in this moment, we have a chance to reimagine what our future looks like. What we've seen through COVID and the disparities that exist in this country across everything from economics to healthcare to police violence, we're seeing that. And so one of the things we need to do is really do a good job of reimagining what our future should look like and what winning looks like. You know, because when you're having conversations with folks, it's great to talk about the problem, but folks need to also hear what the solution looks like and how we plan on working together collectively to get there. And I think if we don't articulate what that vision is, and, to your point earlier, Roland, you said, folks might I don't know any black folks, and I've interacted with black folks all across the level, that have not had interactions with police at some point. Like black folks, I don't care where you live, at some point, you get that awakening where whiteness and white privilege and white fragility and racism smacks you right in your face.
Right. Look,
find it at some point in your life.
But let me take it back.
Sometimes it comes late for folks because they're blind to it.
Right.
And so, but back to the point, it's just really imagining what the future should look like and having the conversations necessary and a listening of how we are going to get there collectively.
But I'll give you an example. The issue of racial. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on 1 second. Hold on, Sean, 1 second. Sean, hold on. I'm hold that point because I got to pick up what he just said. Like racial profiling. The reason racial profiling became a national story, it was because black men of a certain income level were being stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike. That's actually how that thing really began to blow up. So what happened was you had brothers and sisters who were making good money.
You're muted.
I'm
all of that. Okay.
Okay. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. You have black men.
I think there's two sides of the coin.
Sean, hold on. Sean, 1 second.
Black community.
Sean, hold on.
Looks like.
Sean, hold on.
The side of that, we are not responsible for ending white supremacy. White people are responsible for ending white supremacy. If we can find $3 trillion in 2 weeks to respond to COVID-19. Because that was important, and I agree that is important. We can find $3 trillion for reparations. Black folks are not pulling those strings. So I think we have to be real clear on what we can do, but what is on white people and their responsibility and the pressures that we can continue and how they have to change and the onus that's on them.
So I'll do this here, and Sean Preston, you can jump in, and this is the point I'm making. The racial profiling issue became national when black people of a certain income were being stopped by cops. And what that hit them in the face was, I might be able to drive a Mercedes or a BMW, but I'm no different than somebody else who doesn't have my income. And so what happened, so you're absolutely right, people are hit. So African Americans who move into upscale neighborhoods, and then they're being stopped. Well, do you live here? Why are you? And they're looking for homes. All of a sudden, it's like, whoa, hold up. Yeah. So now they begin to realize my education, my degree, my salary, none of that stuff still matters. I'm still seen as a threat in the neighborhood. Sean Preston, I think what we have to do is, again, when it comes to hitting folks on these issues, it's like anything else. I got to get to you where you are. Now, one person may be here, but I got to get to both of y'all. So I got to figure out how to get to you to realize we in this thing together. But I got to first figure out, I got to meet you where you are. And then if that means not bringing you up, that's great. But what I can't do is not talk to you or say you're not worth it because your voice still matters and your vote still matters.
Agree. Like a lot of times in our communities, we often say like what a person need instead of asking them what do they want. Like I see that on an everyday basis where we just preach, and we never ask our communities like what do we want? Like what do we want from our government? What do we want from representation? What do we want from our educational system? So I fully agree with you, sir.
Someone else make the last comment right here before we transition to our second panel.
I just want to say that this was an excellent panel because this panel represents exactly what it is that you speak about. There's so many different dynamics of black men, who come from so many different backgrounds, have so many different experiences. And these conversations have to continue in order for us to get to that one point, that one thing that we all can connect upon that makes sure that we get the equity and the not just survival, but we able to thrive and live as Black men. So I appreciate this conversation.
All right, then. Gentlemen, we certainly appreciate it. Folks, don't forget, you can go to the Black Youth Vote pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. Thanks a bunch to all of you. I'll just go ahead, again, read your names. So just real quick here. Big shout out for participating in this first panel conversation, Jared Sawyer, also Sean Dove, Diallo Brooks, Reverend Tony Lee, Dwayne Crawford. We have, of course, Tony Lewis Jr., and also Sean Preston and my son. Folks, we thank you very much. And my son, glad to see you, my homeboy, to drive off in your car. All right.
Peace and love, y'all.
No one's got ugly, man. I love y'all. Be safe.
Love y'all. Peace, man.
All right, folks. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to then pull up our second panel. So we're going to go to a break. We'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered. All right, folks, ready for our panel 2 for our National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. I'm going to introduce the panel. First, let me know when they're pulling up. But here are all the folks in the second panel. Daryl Coles, National BYV Project Assistant Intern with the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. Demetrius Briscoe is National Black Justice Coalition, Pink Cornrows. Tommy Dortch Jr., Chairman of the Board of the NCBCP, Chairman also 100 Black Men of America. Desmond Meade, he is the President of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. Bishop Staccato Powell, Bishop AME Zion Church, Western Region, President Board of Bishops, AME Zion Church, also Reverend Lennox Yearwood, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus, and Hassan Solomon. He is the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, Board Member, Legislative Director for the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. Those are our panelists for our second discussion. This discussion is going to center on Black men as organizations in terms of how we could take. So the first conversation we talked about Black men. The first conversation we talked about Black men, and then, of course, as individuals, how we reach them. This one, we're talking about organizations, how we use our organizing power to be able to affect change. Now, as I said last week, we had a conversation right here. It was a partnership with Alpha Phi Alpha, and that really was what a driving point of the conversation. How do we use our power to speak to these issues, but we do so with organizations? Now, see, one of the things that I've been saying for the longest that we don't really understand is that we've got great infrastructure. We've got a lot of organizations out here. But the question then is how we are using our organizations, how we are taking these entities and then putting their power to use. That is a real big part of the thing here. And I've been saying this for the longest, that if you read Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, he literally says in the book, there are 4 institutions that can save Black America. He says the Black church, the Black press, fraternities and sororities, and what he wrote, Negro professional organizations. And so I've always said, what's the point of having infrastructure if you don't use it? What's the point of having 100,000 members? What's the point of having chapters in different cities if you are not using it? That's really where we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is using organizations. How do we then begin to mobilize and organize? What Dr. Barber's been doing is important, because what they have been doing is mobilizing and organizing. What they have been doing is training, going city to city, organizing people. That's what we have to have more of. And I think too often our organizations are so focused internal, what's happening within the organizations, as opposed to how we can use our power external. And so what I'm trying to do is I want to pull up some of that conversation and play some of that because that you missed last week. And so, okay, folks, we got our panel ready. Okay, well, so there we go. All right, the panel is there. All right, so Lon, do you have another introduction?
No, I'm fine, but I just want to say that I appreciate what you're doing. A very powerful first session. The second one should be just as good because you've got a lot of power in the community in terms of the spiritual community, 100 Black men. So go at it, Roland. It's all yours, man.
All right, Tommy Dortch, I want to throw it over to you first. You're the chair of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation Board. This is what I was just saying is that we have lots of organizations. But I simply believe, and I've been saying this for a long time, that we are not properly maximizing our leverage, our resources, and our brain power to be able to affect change. If there are city councils and school boards and county commissioners and state legislatures and Congress, if they don't know when they see black and gold or crimson and cream or pink and green, or if they don't see that symbol, that lapel pin, 100 Black men, if they don't see Prince Hall Masons, if they don't see that, that means that we are not properly leveraging our power externally. We're too focused on our internal dynamics.
Right. Well, Roland, you're right. And that's why we have to be advocates. I have all of my chapters of 100 Black Men of America have to have public policy committees because they have to make a difference in their local communities. And so those are the things that we understand. What good is to have a potential for power if you don't use it? And we have to be prepared also to call out our own people in our own community. Like Senator Scott today wanted to water down what the Congressional Black Caucus has worked for some time to get us this new Justice and Policing Act. What we have to do as an organization is understand we've got to make a difference everywhere. I've got 18 members of Congress. I've got mayors and city council people all throughout the country. But the key for us, and that's why the coalition is so important, we have 70 members, but all 70 members of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation don't always show up. It's the coalition effort. We came together during the hurricanes and all, and then we die out. We get excited from Trayvon and want to do something, then it dies out. We've got to work collectively. And that's why in my organization, with over 125,000 young people and our members, we require every chapter to have to be consistent in dealing with education, with dealing with the issue on economic empowerment, dealing with health and wellness, and of course, dealing with mentoring. And if we don't insist it on that, and in our fraternity, I'm Omega, you're Alpha, but we got some folks still want to socialize instead of using the political power. So you're right, we waste what we have that could make a difference. And then the last thing is that we got to be focused. The police brutality is a catalyst, but we are getting our butts kicked every day from elected officials, from Congress to local governments and all. So racism is everywhere, and we can't just say that only police brutality. We got to deal with racism everywhere. And so that's why we need to collectively come together. And in our organizations, we either need to be true or we need to get our butts out of the business.
Hassan, you're with the machinists and aerospace engineers. And the reality is that's what unions have always been, organizing forces, operating and speaking for the collective. Do we have Hassan there? Hassan, if you're there, unmute yourself, please.
I'm here.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. And that is what I was saying is that with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, again, unions, that's what they were organized to serve that particular purpose. And so you must be able to be organized, mobilized and organized to affect change. Hassan, go ahead.
Yes, no, I couldn't agree with you more. My organization has over 600,000 members. We're the largest defense and aerospace union in North America. we're also the largest transportation union. And a lot of those workers in the transportation industry are people of color. And our goal is to make sure that they understand why elections matter. They understand, most importantly, why their vote matters. And I listened to you earlier, and you talked about connecting the dots. And that's exactly what the Machinists Union tries to do. We educate our membership on how important the electoral process is. You know, the game is the economy. And the rules to that game is legislative policy. And that policy is written by the people who we elect to Congress and to the White House. Now, unfortunately, those rules are written for workers to lose. Those rules are written for Black people to lose. Those rules right now being written to benefit Main Street, and definitely not Martin Luther King Avenue or Main Street. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we elect people that want to support us and support our community and our agenda. And in order to affect change, in order to change the bad policy, you have to change the bad politicians. And so that's what we try to do. We try to educate our members on a daily basis. And we start early. We don't wait till just election time to start doing our voter mobilization and education program. We do it every year. We don't wait a couple of days before the vote. We're doing that program monthly, weekly, in the union halls and in the community.
Desmond Meade, you led Amendment 4 there in Florida, which restored the voting rights for formerly incarcerated. That was a 10-year effort. You could not have done that if you did not mobilize and organize. Speak to how critically important it is where groups chose to get behind your effort as opposed to you trying to go to individuals, why groups mattered.
Yo, definitely. I tried the solo ride. First of all, thank you for having me on, Roland, and of course, the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. Early on in the campaign, it was basically a one-man show, and I realized that, at the end of the day, I even reached out to you, Roland, because I thought that this was an amazing opportunity to get the Divine Nine engaged in trying to collect petitions to help put Amendment 4 on the ballot. And so, definitely, I know you're going to hate this, but, the Mega Sci-Fi, they definitely stood up. The Delta stood up, the AKA stood up, and really gave us a big push in a lot of our communities in which we needed that help. There was still a lot left to be desired, and I'm going to be completely real. But we're an organization that believe in second chances. And so guess what? The Divine Nine have a real second chance to get down and dirty. And here's the key, because I think your first panel really touched on something, Tony Lewis and my son. When we talk about, so often we get caught up in only wanting to talk to the people that we're comfortable with talking to, right? And this is the time in our election where folks really have to talk to people who they're not comfortable. They got to talk to the Pookies and the Ray Rays, right? They've got to go to the hood, in the streets, on the corners, and have those conversations, because those people in our communities are people that have traditionally been ignored, right? And so we're hoping that this time, and with this movement that we see throughout the country, that folks are understanding that Pookie and Ray Ray is just as important as Dr. So-and-so and Sora so-and-so and Brother so-and-so and Reverend so-and-so, that Pookie and Ray Ray can bring the heat, and they could actually be that force that takes us over the top.
And that is the thing that Bishop Powell, we've had for decades. The church has served as that, but what you have now, and I don't think a lot of people really understand this. What you're seeing now, you have the greatest increase has really been non-denominational. Now, people say that's wonderful, but the thing about non-denominational, you're actually not linked to anybody else. So the great thing about denominations is that you have infrastructure. And so when you have infrastructure, you're able to actually place a single call, send out a single email, and now all of a sudden line people up to be able to get behind an action. So how are you, in this moment of Black Lives Matter, how are you emphasizing among the AME Zion Church what needs to be done using that infrastructure to be agents of change?
It's historically documented that the Black church has perhaps been at the forefront of every movement of transformation in this nation and even around the world. When you look at the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King was a strong voice, but he was also an African-American preacher. We can also document things down in Montgomery, where the AME Zion Church was at the forefront. We have the Black Methodist United that consists of the AMEs, AME Zion and CME Church. And 10 years ago, we had a great gathering in Columbia, South Carolina, and we came out with a male investment program targeted at a strategic, systemic, sustainable initiative to address the very things that we are seeing right now. What we have to do is not simply talk the talk, but as Tommy has said and others, we have to now operationalize and mobilize and implement these strategies. And even on the first panel, one of the recurring themes was not simply the vote, which is very important. We have to do that. We have to not just go to the polls, but we have to begin to take advantage of the early voting process. There are groups like Sojourners and the Skinner Institute, along with the Black Church. They have a Lawyers and Collars Day where we can now vote early. So we have to mobilize our people in the churches to vote early. Though we're not gathering in the sanctuaries as we have done before, the church is not just a building. We have to continue to have linkages with our people and mobilize them to the significance of what's happening at this very moment, not just with Black Lives Matter. But the key thing is we have to now ensure that we have our own. Everything we need, we have. We don't have to wait for anybody to fund our causes or to do anything. We spend perhaps more money in the US economy on things of luxury than anybody else in this society. Now we have to have our own banking institutions, not just the small time mom and pop lending agencies, but a global bank that links us from this country and all African Americans of the diaspora to the continent of Africa, where we have the greatest resources on all the planet. So it's time for us to move away from just talking the talk, Roland. I appreciate what the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation and Melanie has done down through this last 5-6 years or so. But we've got to, those of us who are on this call tonight, not just have a candid conversation, but we have got to begin to mobilize. And we are relaunching on August 1st, the Male Investment Program. You can like us on Facebook at the Male Investment Program. You can go on to Instagram, where you will see at MIP The Village, because we have to empower our men, boys, to stand up and be strong models and be the Adams of this generation and be who God has commissioned and called us to be in this moment in time.
Apollos, again, infrastructure matters. How is your organization mobilizing and organizing specifically Black men when it comes to what's happening right now in the streets, but also in the suites?
Well, for us, it's, first of all, thank you for having me this evening and being a part of it. We appreciate the leadership of Melanie Campbell. One thing that we do is we continue to work with other unions. And I consider Hassan my brother, but also our leader with the Labor Roundtable and showing the strength among Black trade unionists and being a part of those organizations and moving. One thing we're doing is also by closing the ranks, particularly of those who are in law enforcement that are Black, to stand forward on some of the issues that are affecting Black communities to move them forward. Many of our folks are in our industry that are federal employees continue to see the struggles and push forward. However, they are there trying to make corrective change. And in corrective change, that also means taking corrective action. So you'll see them now engaging our membership to make sure, hey, have you checked your own voting records? Have you made sure you've been voting? Have you made a plan for voting? So we're doing different things that we've never done before around organizing and being trade unionists. We are engaging our membership in different ways, and then we're branching out, because one thing that we realize in our organization is that we can't do it all by ourselves. We have to have partnerships. We have to be with folks. And then also, I'm always encouraged by a mentor, Mr. Dossier, making sure that we're connecting with our young folks that are in the trade unionist movement with the young organization, which is the Young 40 group. I spoke with a person today, and he's like, hey, I need to make sure I'm being engaged in Florida, because that's where I want to get out and help people vote. But I put my ballot in so I could actually vote early. So we're connecting all of those dots for our members and continue to mobilize, by also trying to build strength in numbers.
Demetrius, the power of using organizations to drive and their infrastructure to drive change.
Yes, sir. Well, my organization, Pink Cornrows, and National Black Justice Coalition, is focused on policy change. And so we have to see how dismantling the system of white supremacy and systemic racism is going to make sure that Black and brown people are not being killed by police officers and not being wiped out by medical institutions that are not seeing our best interests at heart, right? I think having economic power is good, but we can't just build these economic systems when the government is still doing things, white supremacy is still doing things to push us down. So I really think we need to organize the community by understanding what we need to do by dismantling, and not just voting, because voting is great and it's important, but we have to work by telling our elected officials that we need to dismantle certain systems that's actually killing our bodies. So I think that's where we need to start as well.
Well,
we are focused on this policy.
Well, I think the thing there, Daryl, then Reverend Yearwood, Daryl first, is that what we often do is our messaging is vote, but our messaging is then doesn't shift to what then happens after the election, regardless of if your candidate won or lost, which is why organizations matter. That was the critique I offered when Diddy made his comment about holding our voter hostage. Is you can't make an argument for something before the election if you don't have an infrastructure that can then hold a person accountable after the election.
So I'd just like to start off by saying thank you for Melanie Campbell for this experience, and also to you, Roland, for sharing your platform to us. So the answer, try my best to answer your question. Organizations and coalitions, I think need to come together. When we come together, because we all reaching the same, we all trying to reach the same goal, get to the same journey. So to quote Malcolm X, he said, it's not that we are outnumbered, but we are just out-organized. So, all the organizations come together, just like voting, when Black people come to turn out together, and we all turn out together, we make real change. So organizations, we come together, we do real work, like in the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. We pride ourselves on partnering with organizations. We've been getting out doing great work, having youth watch groups, and to further talk about what the first discussion with the panel was saying, the messaging, which I thought was real important. The messaging needs to be better to reach better to our Black youth. So I just think all the organizations need to come together, and we can put out a more powerful message, and we can make real systemic change when we all, brain power storm together. So,
Reverend Yearwood, to that particular point, again, how you must be able to then, it's one thing to mobilize during the election, but then, of course, after the election is over. If you're talking about a member of Congress, that's 2 years. United States Senate is 6 years. Governor is 4 years. A county official could be 4 years as well. And I think that is, to me, that has been the greatest mistake that we have made, not just Black folks, but many people out there, is that there's so billions of dollars are spent on the election. But then once the election is over, then shifting to, okay, election is over, Now we got to have this entity as then pushing and prodding, and that might mean I need people who are sending emails and making phone calls, and we might need you to show up to city council meetings and school board meetings. Again, taking all of that and then harnessing it, that to me has been the failure in many ways, because we say, well, what happened to the agenda? Well, you can ask for an agenda during the election, but if you ain't pressing and holding accountable after the election, all you did was waste your time.
Yeah, I agree, Roland. And I just want to, before I say anything else, I just want to say thank you. I want to join the chorus of all of those who've already thanked my dear sister Melanie Campbell and all those who work with her. And obviously you, Roland, for how you've been using Black media to give us a platform. But you're 100% right. I mean, it's clear, and I say this all the time, that demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. And if we're only focused on the demonstration, but not on how we are shaping policy, then we're going to continue this circle of confusion. The most important time in any president's tenure is in their first 100 days. We should already have a roadmap, literally, for the first 100 days, from January 20th to about mid-May, June. We should already know. We should already know who we want for those positions in the cabinet. We should know, literally, we should know what we want as far as the policies across all the agencies, from HUD, EPA, and our institutions should do more. I actually agree with you. We should do more. I think many of us are doing more. I think we realize that we need to shape policy, because we clearly see either you shape policy or policy will definitely shape you. And I think that we need to get more engaged in the policy, not just the conversation of policy, not in the policy, what it means to us, but really in the policy, okay, listen, if when this person gets in office, this is plan A for the first 100 days. This is exactly what we want them to do. And the alternate. And so if Trump wins again, I mean, if that happens, then we should be planning, like, what happens in that 100 days? What do we do? Are we protesting? How are we aligning ourselves? You know, what are we doing to ensure with the new Congress, with those on the state and local governments, how are you managing that? Now, that's where I go to your first point. I want to say that, Reverend Dr. Barber, I want to join with you and say he is phenomenal of what he is doing, because what he is showing many of us is that we have a tendency to want to operate in our silos. And Reverend Barber is saying, no, we must break the silos. He's also saying to many of us that we have a tendency to only work in one space. Like, we're in voter registration, we're in voter protection, which is critical, but we just stay in that space. Or we're in the movement for Black lives, or we're in labor, we're in the church. What he is doing is this. He's saying that these other spaces that have traditionally also been run by our white counterparts, I'm not just going to leave that to them. So if it's militarism, I'm going to be in that space. If it's the environment, I'm going to be in that space. If it's poverty, I'm going to be in that space. So what Reverend Barber is doing is saying that, listen, it's all linked together. We must break down the silos. And that's why you're seeing this tremendous success around the Poor People's Campaign. But definitely, to your point and to your question, we have to get much more serious about the first 100 days of the new president's tenure and what they propose to do.
Anyone can answer this question, because the thing that, and this segment of the discussion is about organizations and infrastructure. And folks, again, jump out and then we'll pull you up. It's very simple. Not only must you be organized, but you also must train people. And if there's one thing that Reverend Barber's been doing that is the most underappreciated aspect of the Black freedom movement, is that SCLC, SNCC, CORE, NAACP, they trained people. They took them through civics classes. They had freedom schools. There are a lot of people today who just want to sort of just jump out there. And I'm like, if you don't go through the training, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Who wants to speak on that? Anybody?
So,
Desmond, go ahead, Desmond.
Take a part of it if I can. It's Apollos here. I've noticed that one of our partners have kind of picked that back up, which is the A. Philip Randolph Institute. And one thing that Brother Solomon and I have us working on is we have literally gone back and started training folks, particularly on how we engage our communities, going back to barbershops and beauty salons, and making sure we're sitting there talking to folks on Saturdays when they're at their busiest portions and engaging them on the policy. The one thing that I think that we miss on, that we've engaged with people on, is not just the elections, but also after the elections, watching our elected officials with some of these boards and commissions where things are decided that don't necessarily come before a city council or a county council, and engaging our politicians specifically that, hey, when it comes time for these other appointments, you should be looking at our communities when it comes to zoning. And that's something that A. Philip Randolph is doing when they're having their stuff with Cleola Brown, something that Brother Solomon and I are working on with them to engage them with that. And I think that's what we are, to make sure that we're engaging our people, going back to those types of trainings. And also, but not just in our traditional space of at a conference, but at a barbershop and at beauty salons. And I know they're doing that in places like Ohio and in Florida and in North Carolina.
Desmond, you wanted to jump in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, because what you were saying just resonated with me, Roland. I mean, because Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the program that we're running right now, I think is so unique and much needed. Like when we're out there and we're registering returning citizens, right? We're not just registering to vote. We're also giving them surveys that they have to complete, because we want to find out what it is that keeps them up at night. What are the issues that's most important to them? And then once we get that, we're actually able to re-engage them and have them join our chapters, where we actually do take them through what we call, it's a program that one of our leaders and my wife Sheena actually developed, called power training sessions, right? Where they have 3 different levels. Level 1 is Civics 101. You know, many of returning citizens have never voted before. And that's something that we seem to forget, right? Look at a person like me. When I'm voting in August, it's going to be the first time that I've voted in over 30 years. All right. And so there is that basic level of training about where to vote, how to vote, you know, and the type of things that you need to know to be an informed voter. But then that level 2 is how we connecting now your vote and letting you know how powerful it is, and connecting it to issues that you said are important to you. And then level 3 is how do you become that field general in your family or even in your community, where you're learning about how to canvass, how to run phone banks, how to organize community meetings, and how to mobilize your people to the polls. And so that is something that we are definitely 100% committed to in Florida, especially when engaging Pookie and Ray Ray, right? It's an equal, because we do believe, once again, that they're going to be the difference, that with people with felony convictions are going to cover the gap, not only in Florida, but throughout this country. And I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Anybody else? Go ahead, jump in.
But there's also another element to the training. Those who have spoken before, I totally agree with, but we have to start early. We can't allow our young people to get to teenage years and start trying to do remedial and reactionary things. So what we are also proposing is that we start at 5 years old with our Saturday academies and train them in civic participation, train them in economics so they understand what it means to be responsible, and also have the means to equip themselves to care for their families. We have to make sure they have a proper spiritual grounding and foundation. As I alluded to early on, Dr. King and who he was in terms of clergy, you've already heard about Bishop Barber and the things he's doing. So we have to begin a strategic training process for our young people. We can't wait until they have an encounter with the police and then try to rescue them. We have to teach them how not to have an incident with the judicial system, if at all possible, and make sure that they have the grounding to graduate from secondary education and have the avenues that's available to them that can continue to equip them and empower them for the days that lie ahead. So when they get to the age of voting, They don't have to be coerced to register. It's a part of who they are. When they get to the point of engaging city councils and ready to run for school board or going to become a justice on the Supreme Court, that they have the equipping that they need from the very inception of life, and not wait until they get into a situation where we have to come and try to remediate the circumstance and situation.
Hey, Roland, if I could jump in, if I could jump in there real quick. I just want to add one piece to that I think is important. And I just want to say that young people, first I agree with you on the training aspect, that we should do more training and our institutions should do more training. But I definitely want to say this, that young people are out there doing that. I don't want that to not.
Right. They are. No, they are. I'm just simply emphasizing it because, again, the reason I'm saying that's the most underappreciated aspect of it, because the train. Everybody just thinks that, well, you know what, I want to protest, and I think we are seeing some of that. Where, okay, you're protesting, but then how do you now channel that? Then how do you now train? How do you shift from what happens in the streets to now, okay, what do you do? The city council committee, the fire and police committee, as opposed, what about the city council? Well, you got to go to the committee first before that bill goes to the full council. The training aspect, we got to constantly keep people understanding that our organizations can also be doing that. So Reverend Yearwood, then Tommy Dortch.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarification, Roland. I agree with you on that. I just want to make sure, because I think that what we're also seeing now with, I think, a lot of the young folks who are out there is because they have been having some real serious conversations. Actually, I think that they're being bold in their analysis. For instance, they want to defund the police. I think those who've been around want to coach that and change that and wordsmith that. And they are very clear on what they want and the reason why they want that. They want to, say, listen, the budgets that are going to these police departments are bloated. And literally school teachers don't have what they need. And listen, we need to redirect funding. And so they're very clear on that. They're very clear on their analysis. They're really clear on what they want. So I think that there has been a number of groups, from the Dream Defenders, Hip Hop Caucus, Sunrise, Zero Hour, so many of these young groups that are out there that are having some real serious conversations that maybe we don't see. I mean, I see them, I'm around them. Maybe some people don't see it, but they're having some real deep conversations. And it's not just Black folk. You have white folk and brown folk and red folk, all these folks coming together, which is now creating the element where you don't see just white allies, but white accomplices. And so I think that we have a new moment here where there is some training, but to your point, as institutions, we should do better. I mean, us being the larger civil rights organizations, we should do much better having that training or giving the resources to these young folks so they can do the training themselves.
Tommy, go ahead.
And I think what we have to understand is not either or. There are a number of things we must incorporate. The coalition, for example, we're being successful because we have units throughout multiple states. And those units work together. They do training. They do collaboration. We have our Black Youth Vote. And I have to give credit. Our women are far, far ahead of us Black men. And we're trying to address on how we play catch up as Black men. And then even understanding now the conversation, Roland, you mentioned earlier, we're talking about waiting until we get a president. We need to be, and again, we need to be true to ourselves and quit political games of knowing what the reality is. We're putting all our eggs in one basket, for example, saying we want Vice President Biden to have a Black female candidate for vice president, when in fact, we need to be talking right now about an African-American woman on the Supreme Court. We need to talk about those cabinet positions we want. We need to be talking about the budget that includes African-American and small businesses, that includes this whole issue about funding education back to the level of where it was, looking at what we do for HBCUs, looking at this whole issue as we look at judgeships. This president we have now just appointed as 200 judges.
Yep.
And those folks are on the bench for life. And we need to understand what that means. And then we need to look at the U.S. attorneys throughout this country and look at the Justice Department, which has been totally decimated. And then we need to look at other issues like the Black banks. 10 years ago, we had 85, we're down to 19. There's so many issues. Instead of us looking at one issue And we're getting ready from the coalition to move our Southern strategy team into Atlanta to work more in the South so we can make a difference even in this upcoming election. But what will work is coalitions working together, and us understanding too, as we have this that real men vote, is getting Black men to get out front and quit sitting behind, getting our Black-owned businesses who benefited from all the work all of us have done, who are taking their money home and afraid to speak up and speak out. And so we've got to understand the strategies. And one last thing, in Fulton County here, we have a predominantly Black county commission, but we got one commissioner who is a Republican hiding under a Democratic umbrella who votes with the Republicans every time. They try to cut out the CBDG grants. That's money that helps our people. He refused. And what we did for 3 consecutive commission meetings, we shut them down because they have public opening times for public input. And we packed that place. We had so many folks, they couldn't take care of their business. That finally we scared them into doing the right thing. We need to use strategies that work, but the other side, it works when we all come together.
And we talk about that agenda. And again, anyone, I know in this round have not heard from Hassan, Demetrius, and Daryl. I think Apollos as well, but I did hear Apollos. So, for instance, and I had no problem saying it because I criticized it then. It was an embarrassment that the Black organizations did not hold a meeting until 5 years into Obama's term to talk about a Black agenda. It was after the election in 2012, and I was there, and I was going, so we just skipped the whole first term? Now, granted, there were organizations who did stuff, but LGBT organizations presented Obama with a 54-page agenda within his first 60 days. I remember when there was some sisters who were upset with the My Brother's Keeper initiative. And they were like, well, where's the My Sister's Keeper initiative? And I had to remind them that was an office of White House women and girls that was created within the first 90 days. Why were y'all not demanding that office present an agenda? See, so I think in many ways we can't. At some point, we have to be willing to look in the mirror, and we can't just say, "Hey, what about us?" if we have not organized to push people to address us.
Well, Roland, I like to answer that. To go back to the issue of training young people, right? I think we have to have a pipeline of leadership, right? We need to have organizations making sure that these people that are coming up in the protests, that are marching in the streets, are being trained and being brought into the conversation about, you know, maybe one day run for office, or you need to make sure that you're going to your civic engagement meetings, your council meetings, talking to your congressman, right? I think we need to have room for young people that are not necessarily given the opportunity to be in these spaces, right? If it wasn't for Pink Cornrows and the National Black Justice Coalition, I wouldn't be here for you today, right? So I really think it's to give space to people who are not necessarily heard, who are not necessarily seen as someone who should be in the front lines, like queer people, trans people, right? I really think we need to reach out to those different organizations, different people, different groups to say, okay, well, we see you doing the groundwork, and we just need to bring you in, train you up so that you can run for these positions, right? You can be in certain C-suites and corporations. I really think that's a big, big, big thing that we have to focus on, is like reaching out and making sure that these people who don't necessarily have the tools, who don't necessarily have the resources to be in the White House or be on Capitol Hill, but making sure that we are reaching out to them saying, we'll have you, we have your back, we're gonna help you out.
Daryl, weigh in.
I just want to double back about the youth training. So under Thomas Dorsch and Melanie Campbell, we've been hosting right before the Corona outbreak. We was getting ready to host in September a Black Youth Vote youth training, where we was going to have fly out different youth organizers to Atlanta, where we was going to host different levels of training. And also Black Youth Vote's been hosting local training within our own sister states, where we had branches of Black Youth Vote at. So Black Youth Vote has been doing our part, thanks to Melanie Campbell Thomas, those to energize, motivate, and organize Black youth to get ready to own their political power. So we've been doing our part to motivate the youth and get ready to vote. So training has been very important, and we've been doing our part and trying to do our part like to really energize the youth to own their political power and get civilly engaged, because it's more important now than ever.
Got about 6 minutes left. I'm gonna throw this out there, and anybody can jump in. Outside of your organizations, who is doing this well? Who can serve as a model for people out there in terms of to activate, engage, organize, and mobilize Black men or Black people in general? Anybody can jump in.
I think there are a number of people that are doing it exceptionally well. Thomas Dortch has been on the front lines with the 100 Black men. We've heard his voice. He continues to lead. I think Melanie Campbell with the whole civic participation is doing an outstanding job. There are all other organizations that have been on the front for quite some time. Urban League is still on the front, but I think what we have to do now is reach beyond ourselves and come together in a collective way and blend our voices to speak with a cogent, concise, and concrete message for what we are going to do. As you've already pointed out, Roland, we can't wait until things happen. We have to have an agenda in place and make the kind of specific requests, if not demands, to get the things that we need to continue to propel ourselves forward. This is the first time I've used this concept, but I'm going to put it out there. In some instances, we're going to have to resegregate. We can't just try to be assimilated into the larger culture. But when segregation was at the fore, many of the things that we have lost. Thomas talked about the number of banks that we used to have, the number of businesses in our communities, and all of that has gone by the way. So now, as opposed to simply protesting, we have to put up our own solid infrastructure and foundation. We've got the census is going on. We need to make sure that we are counted in the census. So when this $625 billion is being divvied up, our communities are not overlooked. Our infrastructure in our communities have to be supported as well. So we've got to now not just look at individual organizations, and I think Reverend Yearwood talked about the silo effect, but we've got to get beyond ourselves and link up and ensure that we have the kind of presence and participation that we require to do what we need to do.
Roland, I think
Hassan,
organized labor is a prime example that the Black community can look at that is organizing and pushing an agenda. They don't attack organized labor because we're weak. They attack us because we're strong. Because 100 days into the election, we do have a defined agenda. We do understand that social issues divide us, but economic issues unite us across genders, across race, across economic stratus. And that's why we are so effective in supporting candidates to support us and support our agenda. So as far as the Black community is concerned, we need to look at organized labor and look at the structure that they've had in place. My union has been around for 130 years. And they're going to be around for another 130 years. So we got to make sure that this is not just a moment. This is a movement that lasts the test of time. Thank you.
Desmond.
And let me just real quick too on this is that we have to look at how the structure was done even in the past. There's no one organization that is the best in class. We have to come together. Even with Dr. King, everybody saw SCLC, but the NAACP, A. Philip Randolph, everybody took a piece of the pie and worked it, but they worked it collectively. We need our unions. In the coalition, we have unions. In the coalition, we have all of these different organizations. I'm fortunate in the 100 Black Men of America that we have men who come from all of the different fraternities, who come from so many different walks of life, and we take the best in class and incorporate that into what we do. And then we don't have a problem in going outside of the quote membership to other communities because we have to understand we're in this together. And I caution all of us. Last Sunday, I had over 40 young leaders on a call with me. And what we have to do is not, the young leaders need to know how to do it. We need to embrace the fact that they have their thoughts. And what I did with them was talk with them about what their agenda was. And we talked with them as those elders in the village about having an end game. Yes, you demonstrate, but Dr. King and those always had a purpose and saying, okay, when you go in, but the amazing thing is they have agendas. The amazing thing is they're doing voter registrations at all of these demonstrations. So what we have to do is understand there's a time to lead, follow, or get out of the way, and understand that those elders in the village have a role, those who are developing have a role, and our young people have a role. And when we respect each other, then we will get things done. I meet on a regular basis with my hip hop community here in Atlanta, because they've said we don't respect them and we don't engage them, but I can call any of them up because they know I respect, and I simply say we need them. They can reach our younger people quicker than us, and we have to make sure the right message is going there. So with all of that, my whole approach is we have to keep working. The coalition is pulling us all together, and we have to be strong enough to say, I don't have to be the first on the list. I don't have to be out front. This is for the family, and we have to work together as a family, and that's the only way we're going to succeed. And embracing people like you, Roland, and others who are doing the things you do. We got to know that we got soldiers out there working for us, and we got to support you and others.
Desmond, you want to jump in? And this will be the final comment, Desmond. All right, is Desmond on mute? Desmond, you on mute?
Yes, I think this. Thank you so much.
Look at you got all that equipment over there. You on mute
and set up for me, because here's the deal: when you talk about coming together, one of the critical elements that we keep missing is that we're trying to make these decisions and we're trying to create these agendas, but we're not engaging with the people that are directly impacted by the policy.
Right.
Right now, here this whole country is talking about police brutality, right? But how many people, right, that's actually got a mic, right, that's actually talking on behalf, trying to create these policies, are actually people who've been brutalized by the police, right? When you talk about how are we not letting people, returning citizens and formerly incarcerated people, be the driving force, right, behind creating these criminal justice reform policies, or reforming these police department policies, or even state attorneys, the district attorneys. And so we cannot have a complete agenda. We cannot have a foolproof agenda until we are engaging and allowing the people who are mostly directly impacted by the issues that we want to talk about to let them lead, right, to let them actually set the trend or the standard. Because at the end of the day, it's the person that's experiencing the pain the most as have the most investment to actually get rid of that pain and to permanently get rid of it, right? So we're not about taking those shortcuts. We know exactly what's wrong because we've been a part of that system. And it is time for even our leadership and our other brothers that's in position of influence and power to create that space for people like me and so many throughout the country to be able to walk in there. And that brother needs to say, you know what? I know Joanne Reed, you might want to talk to me, but I got a brother in Louisiana. I got a brother in North Carolina that's been living this stuff and can speak to it much better than I can. That's who you need to talk to. And we shouldn't be so quick to run and talk to Joanne. We should be so quick to be at the table trying to set the policies. We need to let the people who are experiencing the pain the most be right there at that table and lead the way.
All right, gentlemen, I certainly appreciate it. Let me go through again and want to thank all of our panelists for being here. Daryl Coles, Demetrius Briscoe, Tommy Dortch, Desmond Meade, Bishop Staccato Powell, Reverend Lennox Yearwood, Hassan Solomon, as well as, did I miss somebody? I think did I get everybody? Apollo, my bad, Apollo. My bad about that. So we certainly appreciate all of you being on the panel. And again, Apollo's Baker. Gentlemen, thanks a bunch. Lon Walls, closing comment, go.
Yeah, I don't know if Melanie's there. I wanted to see if she wanted to close it out.
Now I see her. Okay, so they had you up. Yeah. So, all right. So who's closing, Lon or Melanie? Which one?
Melonie's got it. It's Melanie's show. She got it.
It's our show. Thank you, Roland. Thank you to my chairman, Tommy Dortch. I thank every last one of you all for this time tonight. This is not the end. It's a reboot of us rebuilding our Black Male Initiative inside of the National Coalition. So these conversations are not just conversations. We will be having our Black Vote national training, whether it be virtual or in person, depending on COVID. But also having next year the Black Men and Boys Day on Capitol Hill, where we are going to make sure that Black men are front and center present. Like we have Black Women's Roundtable March, we will have a day for Black men and boys. And just thank you all for all you're doing. And together we will bring about the real change we need for our communities. So thank you, Roland, and thank you, everybody.
All right, folks, that is it for us. We certainly appreciate everybody who joined us, who watched YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. Don't forget to support Roland Martin Unfiltered by joining our Breonna Funk fan club. Folks, you can give, again, Cash App, $RM Unfiltered. Also, paypal.me/R Martin Unfiltered. We also have Venmo. You can give via Venmo, as well as you want to use Square to simply use the credit card. Go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Venmo is venmo.com/RM Unfiltered, where you can send a cashier's check to New Vision Media, Inc., 1625 K Street, Northwest, Suite 400, Washington, D.C., 2006, Washington, D.C., 20006. All right, folks, I'll see you guys tomorrow right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Holla! You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
Hey everybody, this is your man Fred Hammond, and you're watching Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Essence Atkins, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey yo, peace world, what's going on? It's the Love King of R&B, Raheem Devon, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, my name is Brescia Webb, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Well, I like a nice filter usually, but we can be unfiltered.
What's going on? This is Tobias Trevelyan. And if you're ready, you are listening to and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up? I'm Lance Gross, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, this is Cheryl Lee Ralph, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, could it be any other way? Really? It's Roland Martin.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? The blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play. Martin.